The Nigerian police force employees, like other employees of the federal government agencies, have been exposed to multiple and diverse remuneratory challenges, such as poor salaries, delayed salaries, which sometimes run into consecutive months at a time, substandard equipment, dehumanizing working condition, and seething working environment. These are oftentimes attributable to inadequate funding of the force by the government, lack of accountability, corruption, and embezzlement of funds. All these challenges and inadequacies have made the performance of the police taxing and sometimes frustrating. The neglect of trust fund welfare component in the remuneratory scheme of the Nigerian police has directly or indirectly resulted into a frightening situation where affected policemen become passive to contacting crimes and preventing breakdown of law and orders. However, concerned stakeholders have come together to seek for the implementation of the Nigerian Police Trust Fund Act that was signed into law since 2019. Speaking to journalists at the media parlor, the National Coordinator on Police Reform in Nigeria, Emmanuel Ikule, aired his opinion on the need for the implementation of the Trust Fund Act.
So this media pal is actually to push the government to be more responsive. It's not just about signing these laws, it's about implementing it. And it's high time we start actually carrying out what is actually in this act. Ensure that these police personnel have been trained, particularly on the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which actually specifies the reason for arrest, duration for detention, the end to arrest in lieu, among other things, other critical issues that have been identified in this particular wonderful act of 2015, Administration of Criminal Justice Act. And this can only be possible if this trust fund can be implemented. If it's not implemented, it will take a long time. A lot of persons, every day we hear series of abuses of human rights by security personnel. But if this particular act is being implemented, at least there'll be funds to actually train them. When they are being trained, it's morally right to also be able to punish the violators of this particular law. But when they are not trained, six-month training for you to become a police officer, at the end of the day, you have no knowledge of these laws. So this gap has been consistent for a long time. So training of the new officers and retraining of the old ones will actually give them more capacity, more competence to be able to carry out their duties more efficiently. And I believe if that is being done, we'll have a more democratic police officers that will be more responsive to the needs of the society, but also have respect for the rule of law.
Well, I think that the law is good, but the challenge with most laws that we make is implementation. And so if you make a law and it's not implemented, then the law is as good as, is useless, in fact. So why we're having this media parley is to see how we can get the law implemented and then also ensure that we build the capacity of the police. Because the police plays a very important role as far as criminal justice reforms in Nigeria is concerned. They are the first contact citizens have with the law. And so if you have a very defective police, or you have a police that is not, does not have capacity, or is not well equipped, or you don't have trained personnel, then we'll continue to have challenges with our criminal justice system.
Over the years, the management of police welfare in Nigeria has been inundated by multiple and diverse problems arising from which retirement has become a dreaded reality by policemen, at least for those who did not die in the course of active duty. The failures of welfare scheme for the police have been attributed to outright corruption, poor planning, and embezzlement of welfare fund, poor post-retirement funding administration, and inadequate build-up of funds, among others. Other stakeholders also had their opinion for the implementation of the trust fund.
First of all, I think that federal legislation sometimes just doesn't address the fundamentals. The law was signed by the president in 2019, and we haven't seen any impact. The police still rely on states for vehicles and so on. We haven't seen the impact. We've not heard anything. Have you heard any public statement from the trust fund? No. So you have to wonder, look, this is other people's money. You are accountable to us. What's going on? And this is a time when the country is facing serious insecurity and criminality. So it's disturbing. Maybe they are doing it, but not telling us. But as far as anybody, and I've discussed with a number of people, there are issues. I think there are issues in the bureaucracy of it. I think there's too much bureaucracy. I think there's too much federal policy in terms of, you have to go to, you have to do the, what's that thing called? That, what's her name? Kwesi brought, due process. Due process, for me, holds up the system. What this law is supposed to do is supposed to give the government the element of urgency in dealing with needs. I would have expected, for instance, that all the police stations burnt in Lagos since last year would have been fixed with the trust fund. Well, that's what it's for, is to enhance police capacity. So I'm entitled to be worried, since I also am a stakeholder in 0.5 of national revenue. I am a citizen. So, but like I say, I'm speaking from what I know. The trust fund has not come out to say this is what we've done since we were established, so we're entitled to ask questions.
They need to take a second look at the Police Trust Fund Act. Clearly, there's need to bring in more stakeholders. States need to be brought in. The private sector also needs to be brought in. And they need to also strengthen the accountability framework for the trust fund so that people can have confidence and be willing to put in their money. And like you've also heard from the media pally, there's need to have an all-encompassing legislation. People are now clamoring for a trust fund for the correctional service. There's also a clamor for a trust fund for the Nigerian Army. I think that we need to have a security trust fund, not just a police trust fund, a trust fund that can address all the gaps that we have in funding with our criminal justice institutions. So my advice is that the federal government needs to take a second look at the law and see how they can improve upon it.
However, the stakeholder urged the federal government to implement the law, and not just signing it into law, but implementation should be done to it for effective response.